Hello, magnetic being. Wonderful to connect with you right now. Your magnetism is noticed. Who and what are noticing it? Let's dive in a little bit to the refinement of this magnetic energy of yours, because you, from my perspective, are online. Your presence is like an illuminating light for many who connect with you. Now, whether that light feels like a comfortable glow or whether it feels like a flashlight shining into a person's eyeball might depend on your current level of embodiment. In this case, we can reflect the light that you hold as the truth of presence. When someone is willing to be who they truly are, they bring that in their presence in a wordless way. Simply through walking through life, making choices through life, and making your decisions as you go, you're actually emanating a field which others can sense. And you don't have to be, a well-versed psychic in order to pick up on that. People can naturally feel that presence. Now, whether they themselves are aware, they may have one of many responses. Like, some people might get really irritated by your presence. And that's not speaking anything about what a wonderful being you are, because I'm certain if they just had a cup of tea with you, they'd finally get it. However, some people are going to naturally feel irritation when they perceive a being such as yourself who is choosing the path of discernment, embodiment, integration, facing one's shadows, etc., because consciously or unconsciously, it's reflecting to them the choices that they may not have made yet in their own path that is calling to them. In other words, witnessing someone who is giving themselves permission to embody more of who they are may consciously or unconsciously trigger for someone else an awareness of what's available to them that they may not be connecting with themselves. Now, not everyone will be irritated. Some people may respond with inspiration. Some people may respond with appreciation. Some people may want to be around you a lot. And this is where your discernment comes in. So let's talk a little bit about this, because my friend has mentioned your magnetism's out here in full force. You are like an energetic, radiant peacock, and I'm here for it. I'm Danielle Lynn, by the way, and I connect with super, super cool cats, such as yourself, who are navigating this reality in their most authentic ways, who are going through the ups and the downs and the in-betweens of life. And here and now, across time and space, we find each other in this moment. And I am here for that as well. So first things first, about your magnetic presence. I'm certain that you already know this on some level, but it bears repeating. What's more important than about how others respond to you or don't respond to you is about your relationship with your own energy and your own presence. Whenever we find ourselves consciously or unconsciously seeking the reflection, the validation, the response of others, this may be signaling to us through an external source that there is some place within ourselves that is looking to be nourished. And temporarily, that part of ourselves may be attempting to find nourishment through the reflection that we experience through interacting with another. Now, this can be fun. This can have a lot of energy. We can feel very enlivened by engaging with others. And if you buy in too much to the idea that others are the source of your validation or your confirmation of who you are, this is where we might fall into a temporary illusion of our power being separate from us in another. It's actually one of the reasons why, we can get really hung up on someone in romantic relationships. It's one of the reasons why we can feel super low or intense when it comes to cultivating our image in the workspace. I certainly don't have any judgment for anyone going through that. In fact, perceptions of others and validation with others has been, through my life, one of my key challenges that I've approached and transmuted again and again. I'll share with you a reflection here because it may assist you in your own journey. Through a lot of my life, I felt very othered. I had a very interesting dichotomy of experience. I either felt very worshipped by others or very othered by others. And there seemed to be very little bit in between. Both of those states actually inspires, especially in a young child, a feeling of dislocation, a feeling of needing to rely on an external source for reinforcement of sense of self. And so I spent a good deal of my developing life and into young adulthood attempting to gauge my state and who I was through the reflections of the interactions of the people around me. And I came to realize that without a core sense of inner self or grounding, I was always at the mercy of other people's ideas, reflections, or thoughts about me. And this created cycles of very codependent relationships, like especially in some of my deep romantic or interpersonal relationships. And one of the things that I discovered as I started to devote my life to deeply integrated work was that any challenge that I was projecting outside of myself had a corresponding inner story, inner twinge, inner aspect that instead of seeking out here for resolution, I could interface within myself. I could connect within myself, nourish, understand, listen, be curious, integrate, without having to seek or pulse or do things out here. Now, this is not a new field of study. A lot of shadow work, internal family systems work goes into this kind of exploration, and there are many other tools. And also in the Self-Alchemy Lab classroom, I have a self-alchemy integration series that is a mix of shadow work and internal family systems if you feel inspired to explore that. And so I found through this deeply integrative commitment to being curious within myself, I shifted from a dynamic where I was imagining that external things were acting upon me and reoriented with my inner locus of focus, my inner locus of perception, of self-validation, of self-trust. And most things that you may be exploring when it comes to living your flow-based life is going to at some point root back to the ability to deeply connect with and trust yourself, to trust the power within you and begin to recognize the experiences, the people, the situations, the players of your life as reflections of your inner experience through the lens that the way that you respond to them is reflecting to you your current inner core state. It's a good breath moment. It's like a good breath and mini dance party moment. I added a triangle today. There's another word for that, pyramid. I added a light pyramid today. I love it. So as you can imagine, the way that you connect within yourself, it highly impacts every single interaction you would have in your reality. I perceive you as a bioluminescent glowing lotus in the middle of a murky gray. This is a time of being receptive, but it's also a time where you're being invited to not push. Like the strong message here is don't push. Don't try and force yourself to run on ice. This would be the way I'd phrase it. You know, if you're trying to get some traction, you think you have to move fast, you're running, you'll actually find yourself moving in place if you try and run on ice. In this case, it can be more energy effective to focus on your magnetism, to focus on your presence, to do nothing from a place of force or exertion than it is to try and push an outcome. along with the understanding and the trust in your timing and the timing of this greater synchronistic field. I will also add that this appears to be in conjunction with a shift in this whole world. So what we're talking about right now, like the message for you, has to do with, let's talk about the great change going on in the world. You don't need to force the new way into this reality. If you're hitting some kind of roadblock or pause, whether it seems to be inside or out, part of the reflection here may be, where can I return to my origin and source point to connect within so I may operate and take the next now step from that place? You know, returning to your core is not going backwards. It's like rebalancing yourself and orienting yourself so that the next step you make is even more grounded, even more strengthened. And whatever you had experienced up until that point is added into your inner library of experience. So that no matter what you have experienced, even if it feels like, you know, we have to shut it all down or we're coming back to basics, there is always a gem, there's always a gift, there's always a distillation that comes from it. Now let's take it a step further. As you orient to the magnetism within yourself, you start to be aware of how you actually move within this reality. And I'm going to offer a paradox here, because truly, when you operate from a magnetic way, you're no longer really moving or pushing through reality. It is more like you are being the presence and reality appears to shift around you. I almost think of one of those VR, virtual reality stations, where you can move and they have you on like an omnidirectional treadmill, right? Because in a very real sense, we're co-creating our reality through resonance. If you imagine and remember that all of reality, all of the time-space experiences exist right now, just across this now moment, where we are focused on seemingly sequential individual moments, there's also multiple dimensions of reality experience. It would be like the whole color spectrum being present, but maybe you can only perceive this window of the color spectrum. And when you orient yourself within yourself in this magnetic place, it's not so much that you have to do anything or convince yourself of anything anymore. You actually find that you start letting go of the ideas of who you have to be, what confidence looks like, what anything has to be. Because now you've remembered that from operating this way, everything automatically happens with you and for you. You may take inspired action, you may make a movement, you may have an experience, but it's not coming from a place of trying to chase or push or prove something anymore. This inspiration emerges from a deeper core place within, to the point where I've witnessed it both in myself and others, that it almost feels like the action is spontaneous. It's almost as though if there's something to do, it just starts getting done, almost like you're in an automatic response. But that automatic response, when attuned to your magnetic core, becomes something that is nourishing for the greater part of your life. And what we're pointing here to is flow state creation. What we're pointing here to is what happens when you're working with your energy and you're not fighting against or for stories or ideas of who you think you are, you should be. One of the reasons this flow state can seem elusive to people is because at the very onset, you may be faced immediately with stories or attachments you have to previous ideas or versions of yourself or versions of your life that may be partially or completely incompatible with your flow. Gasp. This is actually one of the bigger challenges people run into. It's very simple, but it doesn't always feel easy. Because the simple aspect of it would be to be aware of anything that you're currently in resistance to, fighting for, pushing against, and to systematically, in healthy and resonant ways, in ways that are communicative and account for your responsibilities, make the steps to phase them out of your life. But that takes consistency, and it often takes consistency without apparent immediate reward, and it often takes consistency without apparent immediate reward while you're also guiding yourself into the unknown. So as you can see, it takes a certain kind of commitment to yourself, because really what it is, it's about committing to yourself to operate as who you truly are, no longer operating from stories or ideas of who you truly are. And once you place the power back into that central vehicle of you, there is actually a payoff. Because what you discover is, instead of having to push so hard to go from here to here, you find that it becomes as effortless as, well, let's just say, teleporting. But here's the thing, there actually is a gift, there actually is a payoff for arriving there. And what it is you start to experience a more dynamic flow of life. If you are willing to let go of the things that aren't you, even things that may be beautiful in some ways, even people or relationships, even projects, even things, if you are willing to, at the very least, not insist on holding on to them, you don't necessarily have to push them away. What you do is you just prioritize the authentic embodiment of who you are, and you continue to make day-to-day choices. And if you continue to do that, you will naturally start to self-select yourself into a version of reality that harmonizes with what you're committed to. It doesn't take that many choices to shift yourself from here to where you imagine your ideal life is, and you got to still make the consistent choices to live it. This is not about making one big choice and then expecting all of life to change with you. That's what happens when people, let's say, end a relationship, but they don't actually connect with the integrative work, and they might find themselves in a same or similar relationship playing out the same dynamics, wondering, what happened. Now, that's not to say that there's no value in making any kind of choice, and the pattern that shifts you is the one that is made with consistency. I've often said that it's far more powerful to make consistent iterative micro steps than it is to necessarily make one bold sweeping gesture. You could compare this to nutrition. It would be like the equivalent of, I'm not going to eat anything for, one whole day to try and change my nutrition. Or you make consistent choices every day for a month on what to eat and how to nourish yourself, which will reflect in how your body feels and how your energy feels. And so the heart of this message here is a reminder on multiple levels. You are embodying that level of powerful magnetism. People are noticing you, but more important than people noticing you, how are you interfacing with yourself? What yes and no choices are you making in your own life to help you navigate this phase of your reality? The way that you make these consistent yes and no choices are the material for the new tomorrow that you are calling in. If you find it unusual, challenging, strange to make these committed choices, then the invitation you have is why. Because normally that means there is a part of you that either is protecting yourself from making commitments. Maybe it feels, oh, that's too much energy, or I never stick to them, or they're no good. But even that is an invitation for curiosity. I say that as somebody who for many, many years didn't want to make any commitments. And my life dramatically shifted when I started embodying resonant commitments that were deeply nourishing for my psyche. and for myself on all levels. The pattern of authentic commitment that you live within yourself is what helps shape your very already powerful magnetism. It is what helps define which windows and doors you have open and which ones are closed. It's what helps you make more discerning choices in the present moment. Because a lot of times lack of clarity can come from not being deeply grounded and rooted in your core discernment, in your core frequency. And all of this is to say that you are present, aware, connected, and powerful enough to remember and know all of this. At this moment, I'm only reflecting to you the wisdom that already exists within you right now. My amazing friend, it's been an honor to talk with you. I invite you to check out the description link. I have some fascinating portals open right now, and if you feel inspired to explore them, this would be the now moment to do so. And across time and space, I appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to our next resonant connection.